Moonrise, Chapter 12, The Game. My eyes focused on the future as I was pulled away from Jasper's embrace. Dark clouds rolled through the town as lightning lit up the darkening skies. A loud crash of thunder followed not even a second after the strike and quickly quieted. These were the exact type of storms that our family looked for. It meant that we could have fun without being noticed by humans. I quickly met Jasper's worried eyes, and a bright smile lit my face.
"What did you see?"
he asked me quietly, as he smoothly ran his fingers across my cheek. His other hand circled around my waist and pulled me closer to him. "There's a big storm rolling in. A chance for us to finally play
baseball!"
Emmett cheered as he bolted into our room. I frowned at him as Rosalie strolled in right after him. "Sounds like fun. I'm definitely in," Rosalie said as she smiled at me. Jasper released me with an inaudible sigh and took my hand instead.
"I'm in too,"
he said with a broad smile.
"I'll go ask Carlisle and Esme,"
Emmett said, and then he and Rosalie were gone. I tugged on Jasper's hand and started to walk up the flight of stairs to Edward's room.
"What are you doing, Alice?"
Jasper asked me quietly. "Well, someone has to ask Edward, and it doesn't look like Emmett and Rosalie will, so we can," I said, as we continued up the stairs. He followed close behind me, and we stopped outside of Edward's door.
"Much better,"
said Edward with a laugh. Edward held Bella in an awkward position, and I was stunned to see the look on her face. Can I get up now?" I heard Bella's tiny voice say. I breathed a small laugh as she struggled to get out of Edward's impossible grip. "Can we come in?" I asked softly. She struggled again, but Edward sat her easily on his lap. She moved her head to see Jasper and I, and her cheeks turned a light pink as she blushed.
"Go ahead,"
Edward said with a chuckle. I walked into the center of his room and fluidly sat on the carpet. Jasper stayed where he was by the door, his facial expression looking shocked as he turned his gaze to Edward's face. "It sounded like you were having Bella for lunch, and we came to see if we could share," I announced with a joking smile. Bella stiffened for a moment and then straightened out as she looked at Edward.
"Sorry, I don't believe I have enough to spare,"
Edward replied, his arms holding Bella close once again.
"Actually,"
Jasper said, smiling despite himself as he walked into the room,
"Alice says there's going to be a real storm tonight, and Emmett wants to play ball. Are you game?"
he asked as he came to stand next to me. Edward's eyes lit up, but his smile faded as he looked down at Bella. "Of course you should bring Bella," I said happily. I felt Jasper's gaze on me for a brief moment, but I dismissed it for the time being.
"Do you want to go?"
Edward asked Bella, his excitement brewing. "Sure. Where are we going?" she asked.
"We have to wait for a thunderstorm to play ball. You'll see why,"
he promised her. "Will I need an umbrella?" I laughed, as did Jasper and Edward.
"Will she?"
Jasper asked me. "No, the storm should hit over town. It should be dry enough in the clearing," I answered.
"Good then."
The enthusiasm in Jasper's voice was catching, and I felt the excitement coursing through me as well. "Let's go see if Carlisle will come," I said as I bounded to the door, Jasper right behind me.
"Like you don't know,"
Jasper teased, and I let out a little laugh. We flew down the stairs to Carlisle's study, where he and Esme were standing with Emmett and Rosalie. Their faces were lit up with enthusiasm to finally play baseball after so long.
"We're in,"
Carlisle said as he turned to Esme.
"How long?"
he asked as his gaze turned back to me. "Roughly 3 hours, around dusk," I replied confidently. They all nodded.
And then we all heard footsteps as Edward and Bella went down the stairs and out the front door. Moments later, we heard the loud roar of Bella's truck slowly ease away. "Alice, is it really a good idea to have Bella there as well? What about the nomads passing through?" Esme asked in a worried tone. "They won't be coming here until late tonight or early morning, from what I've seen. I really don't think there'll be a problem. Anyway, Edward wants her there," I said. Rosalie stalked out of the room, with Emmett following behind, grumbling to himself. Esme seemed to loosen up. "You're right. No need to worry. You're always right," she said with a laugh. I smiled and left Carlisle's office. Jasper and I walked to our room, and I grabbed my laptop off the desk. I turned it on and listened as it hummed to life. "Alice?" Jasper asked as he came to stand behind my chair. I asked with a smile. I got to the internet and went to one of my favorite websites. Jasper saw this and groaned. "What are you doing?" he asked with exasperation. "Shopping, of course," I said with a laugh. I had kept seeing this blue dress in one of my visions and decided to find it, not knowing what it would be used for. It wasn't for me. The size was wrong, which had me confused for a while. I heard Jasper sigh, but otherwise he stayed quiet. I searched for a few minutes and then finally found what I was looking for. The dress was blue and had a V-neck. I clicked on the size bar and put in the size I had seen in the vision. Confusion swept through me, and then I turned to Jasper. "What, Jas?" I asked. He paused and looked at me with a laugh. "That isn't your size, love," he murmured. "Oh, I know," I said. "Then why are you buying it?" he asked me. "I don't know. I keep seeing it in my visions, so it must be important in some way. Better to be prepared than not," I said with a smile as I clicked to buy it. Jasper shook his head and rolled his eyes at me, but I stuck my tongue out at him. I looked out of the window and saw mist floating from the darkening clouds. "Hey, let's get ready," I announced as I towed him to our gigantic closet. I walked to my uniforms and pulled out one of the vests. I changed into my pants and pulled up my knee-high socks. I pulled the shirt on over my head and then put on the vest. I went to the hats and picked out a navy blue one that we had inscribed for playing baseball. I turned to Jasper, and he had his uniform on already. He walked up next to me and pulled his hat out as well. "Perfect," I squeaked as I clasped my hands together. Jasper chuckled and walked out of the closet. I followed behind him, and he took my hand as we walked down the stairs. Emmett and Rosalie were waiting, and Carlisle and Esme were right behind us. Jasper, Emmett, and Carlisle walked into the garage to get the equipment. They came back moments later with about 24 baseballs and a dozen bats. We walked out of the back door and then broke into a sprint towards the large clearing to the east of our house. It didn't take us long to get there. When we reached the clearing, the dark clouds were starting to push in from the west. "Esme, you should play this time. Please?" I asked. "No, I will stick to being umpire. I like to keep the games clean," she said with a smile. "I promise no one will cheat," I said innocently. "Yeah, you should trust that coming from her," Emmett said as he snatched my hat from my head. I glared at him, and he chuckled loudly. Esme sighed at the two of us and went to sit next to Rosalie. Emmett held my hat over his head, and I glared at him even more. "I'm not jumping for that, Em," I answered. He waved it over his head, and a smile hit my lips. I flew my arm out, balling up my fist, and then punched him in the stomach. He flew back about 3 yards, landing on the ground. I ran up to him and snatched my hat from his hand. "Ha ha," I joked,
and Rosalie, Jasper, and Carlisle started laughing. "It's on, little sis," Emmett said as he jumped to his feet, but I was already running away from him. I ran to Jasper and hid behind him, wrapping my arms around him. "Jas, make him stop," I said with a pout, but I was laughing so hard it didn't work very well. Our attention was then drawn as we heard a loud roaring noise. "Edward," Emmett said with a laugh. "He sounds like a bear," he continued. We all laughed, and then flitted away to grab the equipment. "Let's play catch," I said, as I flung the ball at Jasper. He caught it easily and ran to the other side of the clearing. The ball flew back to me, and I instantly threw it back to Jasper. We did this repeatedly until Bella and Edward came out of the trees by Esme and Rosalie. My eyes moved to the two of them as they walked into the clearing. Esme got up, and she and Emmett walked out to meet them. "Was that you we heard, Edward?" Esme asked as she approached. "It sounded like a bear choking," Emmett clarified. I smiled and was about to go over when I heard wind splitting as something hurled towards me. I caught the small baseball mere centimeters before it made impact with my stomach. I turned and glanced at Jasper, who smiled at me sheepishly. I laughed and darted toward Bella and the others. I ran to a fluid stop right in front of them and smiled. "It's time," I announced, and as soon as I had spoken, a loud rumble of thunder rolled through the sky. "Eerie, isn't it?" Emmett said with ease, as he glanced at me. "Let's go," I said happily, as I grabbed his hand and ran with him to the center of the field. "Are you ready for some ball?" Edward asked Bella. "Go team," she said, trying to sound excited, but nervousness seeped through. "Shall we go down?" Esme asked in her soft, melodic voice. Bella nodded, and they slowly walked to the field. "You don't play with them?" Bella asked shyly. "No, I prefer to referee. I like to keep them honest," she explained. "Do they like to cheat then?" "All the time," Esme smiled. "Ha ha, Alice," Emmett joked as he punched my arm. "I do not. That is always you, and you know it," I said with a laugh. I turned my attention back to them, ignoring Emmett. "Oh, yes. You should hear the arguments they get into. Actually, I hope you don't. You would think they were raised by a pack of wolves." "You sound like my mom," Bella laughed, surprised. She laughed too. "Well, I do think of them as my children in most ways. I never could get over my mothering instincts." "Did Edward tell you that I had lost a child?" That shut Emmett up. We all quieted. Esme couldn't bear that she had lost a child. "No," Bella murmured, stunned by the look on her face. "Yes, my first and only baby. He died just a few days after he was born, the poor tiny thing." She sighed. "It broke my heart. That's why I jumped off the cliff, you know," she added, very matter-of-factly. "Edward just said you fell," Bella stammered. I rolled my eyes at Edward as she said this. "Always the gentleman," she smiled. "Edward was the first of my new sons. I've always thought of him that way, even though he was older than I, in one way at least." She smiled at Bella warmly. "That's why I'm so happy he found you, dear. He's been the odd man out for far too long. It's hurt me to see him alone." "You don't mind, then?" Bella asked, hesitant again. "That I'm all wrong for him?" "No." Esme was thoughtful. "You're what he wants. It will work out, somehow," she said, though her forehead creased with worry. Emmett brought everyone's attention to him. "Teams, I call being a captain," he said loudly. In seconds we had our teams picked out, and we were ready to play. Emmett ran to home plate and stood ready to swing. Jasper stood several feet behind him, ready to catch the ball. Carlyle and Edward took the bases, as I stood at the pitcher's mound. "All right, batter up," Esme called clearly, and the game began. I stayed motionless for a second, and then flung my hand out and released the ball. The next moment, it ended up in Jasper's hand. He threw the ball back to me, and I wound up again, only to give myself a brief smile. When the ball left my hand for the second time, the bat met with it, sending it flying into the trees. Edward was off after it quickly as possible. "Home run," I heard Bella murmur. "Wait," Esme said quietly. "Out!" Esme called in the next moment, and I saw Edward appear with the ball in his hand. Bella's face was stunned, and Esme turned to her. "Emmett hits the hardest, but Edward is the fastest," she explained. Jasper stood up to bat, and I grinned at him. He smiled back, and I flung the ball out quickly. It landed smoothly in Rosalie's waiting hand. She threw it back to me, and moments later I threw it again at Jasper. This time he hit it, sending a ground ball in Carlyle's direction. They both raced to first base, and then collided in the last second. "Safe," Esme called out. The inning changed, and it was our turn. Edward batted first, getting around to second base, and Carlyle batted right after him, getting the two of them back to home plate. I smiled and gave them both high fives as they came in. The score constantly changed as the game progressed. We all took turns with the lead, and occasionally Esme would call us back to order. Carlyle was up at bat again, with Edward right behind him, as a vision hit me. Then I was back in the clearing, my eyes wide, and a gasp escaped my lips. Edward's head snapped up and looked at me. I opened my head, showing him the vision I had just seen. The next moment, he was at Bella's side. "Alice?" Esme asked worriedly. "I didn't see. I couldn't tell," I whispered. Everyone else was gathering around us now, wondering what was going on. "What is it, Alice?" Carlyle asked, with a calm voice of authority. "They were traveling much quicker than I thought. I can see that I had the perspective wrong before," I murmured. Jasper leaned over me, and I felt a wave of calmness go through me. "What changed?" he asked. "They heard us playing, and it changed their path," I said. I looked at the ground. This was all my fault. I should have kept my eye on the nomads. "I'm sorry, Edward. This is all my fault," I whispered, so Bella wouldn't have a chance of hearing it. My gaze flickered to Bella, as well as everyone else's. "How soon?" Carlyle asked, turning to Edward. A look of intense concentration crossed his face as he reached out in search of the others. "Less than 5 minutes. They're running. They want to play." He scowled. "Can you make it?" Carlyle asked him, his eyes flickering toward Bella again. "No, not carrying." He cut off short. "Besides, the last thing we need is for them to catch the scent and start hunting," he continued. "How many?" Emmett asked. 3, I said tersely. 3? He scoffed. "Let them come." I looked at Carlyle as he thought of what to do. It felt like forever until he finally made a move to speak. "Let's continue the game," he finally decided. His voice was cool and level. "Alice, you said they were simply curious." "You catch, Esme," Edward said. "I'll call it now." He planted himself in front of Bella. The others returned to the field, flanking out through the trees every few moments. Esme and I stood around Bella, our eyes sweeping through the trees as well. "Take your hair down," Edward said in a low, even voice. Bella listened to him and took the hairband out of her hair as it fell around her. "The others are coming now?" Bella stated in a colorless tone. "Yes. Stay very still, keep quiet, and don't move from side to side, please," Edward said. He hid his stress very well from her, but it was obvious to us. "That won't help," I said softly, as I watched Edward move Bella's hair around her face. "I could smell her across the field." "I know." A hint of frustration colored his tone. Carlyle stood at the plate, and the others joined the game half-heartedly. "What did Esme ask you?" Bella whispered. He hesitated for a second before answering. "Whether they were thirsty," he muttered unwillingly. I sighed and ran my fingers through my hair. I felt guilty, awful that I hadn't gotten this sooner. "I'm sorry, Bella," Edward muttered fiercely. "I was stupid, irresponsible, to expose you like this. I'm so sorry." My eyes focused on the trees as I started to hear the nomads coming. Everyone stopped and started to come near us. I watched as the 3 figures came out of the trees and started to walk toward us.